What's going on? Welcome to the Weekly Wheaties. Episode 5 this week, we're going to talk about how does the internet work? And obviously within 10 to 15 minutes, there's no way I'm going to be able to explain this on a technical level without diagrams and pictures and fancy words and an acronym sheet so you know what everything we're talking about is. But I'm wanting to discuss this more from a surface level so we can kind of understand some basics, what's going on. When you open up your phone, your computer, your laptop, your tablet, whatever you have, and you type in a website, what's actually going on the back end? Well, generally speaking, what's happening is you're accessing a website through a domain name service, through a company called ICANN. You can go look those up later. They're really irrelevant, but for the sake of the argument, there's one company that basically controls all of the website domain names. So google.com, the .com and anything before it is owned by a company called ICANN, where you can purchase that, or technically you're renting it because you have to pay a yearly fee and you never own it forever. It's a yearly thing that always comes up. You can buy multiple years at a time, which I'll discuss in a little bit, but ultimately what you're doing is you're renting space of a quote unquote google.com to forward to some servers that live in the cloud, right? Well, the cloud is physically servers that are stored somewhere in the US or overseas. Typically, they are stored in the country for where the website is because of just speed of access. Talked about latency yesterday or last week. The latency has a lot to do with the location of things. So you can get access to this information theoretically at the speed of light. Well, at some point it still has to slow down because it has all these servers that it's going to. So your ISP, Internet Service Provider, has a server. So you have to make that jump. And then you have to make the jump from your local ISP server to the regional server that they're connected to. Then you have to jump to another server that might house the ISP for, let's say, Google servers. So then you got to jump to that server, and the list goes on. You might have like what they call hops, anywhere from 5 to 15 hops by the time you access a website. And every time that there's a different hop, it can slow down. And if you're trying to access a website that nobody within your regional ISP has ever accessed, it's going to take longer because there's no cached sites stored anywhere within the network of networks, if you will. Hopefully that makes sense, at least from a 1,000-foot view. But the more people access a site, the more it gets cached and gets stored across different servers, and the quicker it is to access that. So that's why when you go to a website a bunch of times, it loads quicker than websites you've never been to, at least generally speaking. So these servers store the code of the websites, which is typically all text. Your code is going to be text in the form of CSS, HTML, now there's HTML5, there's Java, there's all these programming languages that web designers can develop on, and depending on the language dictates what can happen or what can't happen on that site. So for instance, like a shopping website typically can't be built, at least easily, on your standard HTML code. You have to do some other type of coding. And there's companies that can kind of sandbox this for you and build out templates to where you can just go fill in information for that website. Some popular ones are like WordPress. There's WordPress.com and .org, so you have to be careful there. WordPress is actually going to be my pick of the week, my app pick, to show you that you can build a website essentially for free. Wix is another one, but I tend to like WordPress. But the WordPress.com and the WordPress.org, they're two separate ways of doing this. One of them houses your information on their servers, and you can pay for that, or you can do the free version. The other version, you have to pay for what they call hosting on another server. So something like GoDaddy is a popular one where you can store a website. My website, the41week.com, is actually housed on WordPress through GoDaddy. So I have to pay two fees. There's a yearly hosting fee, which is what I pay to GoDaddy to store the website files for my website. That's all the text documents, the pictures, any audio, any video, things of that nature, files. I have a few PowerPoints and Word docs that are stored that I share out through there. All of those files are stored on GoDaddy servers, and I pay a yearly or a monthly fee to them for that access. And what they're doing is they're basically saying, we're going to store this for you, so if people try to access it, it's going to be available 99.999% of the time. And typically they work on either 3 nines, 4 nines, or 5 nines, because the 99.999 or 4 nines or 5 nines dictates uptime. And nobody can ever guarantee 100% uptime, because if the power goes out, or if there's a surge, or if there's some type of issue, it's just anytime that they even have to switch from one server to another, that dictates downtime, even if it's a split second or so. So nobody's ever going to guarantee 100% uptime. I think Microsoft Azure services, Amazon Web Services, AWS, a lot of them are like in the 4 or the 5 nines. So the uptime is very, very high. And we always, in the news, they always talk about the downtime, because that's what they're always complaining about. But if you think about it on the grand scheme of things over a year, you're getting your 99.9999% uptime. It's just do the math, right? Well, I don't want to get too far off into that. So hosting, you're paying to store your website so people outside of your country, your city, your state, whatever it might be, can access that. You could host a website on your own personal computer at home and allow people to access that. The problem is threefold. It's a security risk, because you're opening up your entire network to everybody else. It's an uptime risk, because if your power goes out, people can't access your website. And then you're also limited by the hardware you actually have, because let's face it, like GoDaddy and these larger companies have tons of servers and hardware that keeps your website up. If you're just storing it on even, let's say, an expensive computer, let's say a $5,000 computer, the chances of that being able to accept all of the traffic that could come to that could literally shut your computer down. A great example of this is from the movie The Social Network, where when Mark Zuckerberg was starting Facebook, he literally hosted it on his personal laptop in his dorm, and it had so much traffic. Not only did it mess up his computer and kill his computer, it shut the entire network down because the traffic was so much. So that's one reason it's good to pay companies like GoDaddy. And again, I'm just using them as an example because that's what I use, but pay them for hosting because it's negligible. It's less, $100 to $500 a year, depending on how much you need. Obviously, if you have a bigger site like Google.com or something, they're going to have to pay a lot more for hosting because they have a lot more traffic and a lot more going on. And a company like Google is doing their own hosting anyway. Moving on. Then we have what's called the domain. And I mentioned this a little earlier, but the domain is the www dot. So whatever that is with an extension. The most popular extension is the .com. There's .orgs, .net, .edu, .gov, whole 9 yards. I purchased a domain called roundabout.fun, F-U-N. The downside to those crazy extensions is they typically don't work well with SEO. When people are searching for websites, you're not going to get a lot of organic people finding you. The .coms are the king in the world of the web, right? But I think I paid $34 for like 5 years, and I was like, yes, bye. So roundabout.fun I own because it was fun and I like roundabouts, and why not? On the typical side of domains, though, you pay anywhere from $10 to $30, $40, $50 a year. So the 401 Wheat that I own, I think I pay $15 a year. And typically you can get locked into a pricing, so as long as you've been a customer, you can keep that price going. But as the websites get more traffic and get more people coming to them, their value goes up. So a domain could also be used as this digital real estate, if you will. I'm not talking about like the metaverse or anything like that, but a .com, if you own that, people have bought and sold these for thousands of dollars. So there is money to be made. It's really hard to do that now because there's bots and websites that go buy up websites whenever they expire, and then they can resell them. But you can go see what websites are worth. You can make offers like Namecheap.com. I use Porkbun.com, Hover.com, GoDaddy. Any of them, you can buy specific domains. And what's cool about a domain is you can also have it just by itself. Like, it doesn't have to go to a website. You can make it to where there's nothing there, so you just own the domain. So you can own your own email. So like for instance, I also own GarrettWheat.com. And if you email, I think it's, I don't know the exact email, but like me@GarrettWheat.com, it will forward to my personal email. But you can also pay for an email subscription, so you use the domain at least for just the email extension. So you don't have to have a gmail.com, for instance. Another thing you can do with domains is forward them to your social media sites. So I've done this with a few friends and family members, if you will. They wanted me to build a website. I've built websites in the past, but my question always is what do you want your website to do for you? Why do you need a website? And if the only reason you have that is so people can find your phone number, your location, maybe see what your Instagram or your Facebook is, you don't need to build a website for that. You can just buy the domain and have it forward to your social media page. It's a really cool, really easy way to do that. It works really well too. You can also implement that in those QR codes where people scan them. And it's really cool if you own a business to have the domain, right? You want that .com. That says something. Just like if you're applying for a job, you don't want to use a Gmail. Or I'm sorry, if you own a business, you don't want to have Gmail as your typical email. You want an email extension of at least your domain or something that you potentially pay for that's more professional, if you will, than a Gmail. Even Google doesn't use @Gmail, they use @Google, right? So yeah, I just want to kind of give y'all an overview of how websites work, why they cost money, because you're actually paying to store that information somewhere. You're paying for that bandwidth usage so people can access your website. But there's tons of things you can do with domains. I think roundabout.fun, I have forwarded to one of my blog posts. So there's some other cool things I'm working on with all of the free time that I don't have, where I bought a few domains that for very intentional purposes. I just haven't been able to kind of put them to work yet. But people do buy and sell them. Gary Vaynerchuk, or also known as Gary V, I want to say the way he kind of got started with his whole thing was buying and selling domains. Or I think it was him, some YouTuber personality, if you will. I'm sorry, Gary, if that wasn't you. But yeah, if you have any questions about how websites work, domains, bandwidth, hosting, email, any of that, I have a few other ideas for some podcasts to go along with that. But hope y'all have a great day. Hope you learned something. See ya.